So many organizations still promote cognitive and physical rest as a first-line management, even though research suggests active rehabilitation may be superior. Systematic reviews show little evolution in post-concussive care recommendations over the last 20 years. So basically, we're still doing the same things, right? So what's the definition of insanity? Of course, doing the same things over and over and over again, expecting something to change, expecting a different result. So here's why the standard approaches aren't cutting it and why a completely different approach and a complete approach is necessary when dealing with traumatic brain injuries. So, Dr. Barry, let's talk about TBIs and the pathophysiology. When we talk about TBIs, we're not talking about a single event, but a cascade of events. What do we mean by that?
So it's a mechanism where it doesn't have to be a head injury. It can be a body contact. It can be repetitive. So that it's not just getting knocked out cold and unconscious. That's one of the X factor starting points. You don't have to have an unconscious head injury to have a traumatic brain injury. When you have a TBI, a car accident, things of that nature, there is a massive spike in glutamate, that excitatory neurotransmitter in the brain. And that winds up, it overexcites the brain neurons to the point where you have this massive opening of the channels in your neurons. So all these things rush into the neuron, like calcium, like sodium. And when sodium comes rushing into a neuron, it draws, we all know that basic osmolarity gradient. You draw water with it. Excess water can cause the neurons to expand, and they can even, expand to the point of dissolving, exploding, basically, in oversimplified terms. Or that excess calcium comes rushing in, and that's where you start to get a lot of these faulty protein replication mechanisms that come in. And when you start to have this massive barrage of this chemical and cellular reaction, you start to release excess free radicals. You start to release enzymes that are eating up and trying to clean up the debris, but that starts to take out adjacent neuronal pools. And then you start to have these downstream effects of mitochondrial disruption and oxidative stress. And so now you've got free radical components. And most importantly, or one of the most important things, is you get this inflammation cascade that you need initially. You need inflammation to protect and repair the brain. But one of the big issues with post-concussion syndrome is that inflammation cascade doesn't turn off, and it's excessive. So that's another big placeholder we're going to put for post-concussion syndrome, unresolving TBI stuff. So we'll start to lay down that there's a big chemical cascade and a biochemical effect that has to be addressed. And it's not just about, making sure that they don't have a skull fracture, for example. And that's one of the things I'll interject right now, Dr. Woolner, is that one of the reasons why TBI is so prevalent, post-concussion syndrome is so prevalent, we've all seen this. The patient goes to their primary care. Maybe they get ordered x-rays of their neck, for example, or something like that. They go to the ER. And that's great. We need to rule out fractures of the spine and things like that. They go to the ER, they run a CT for a closed head injury like a subdural hematoma. That's great. It's a necessary thing. But those aren't functional tests. Those are not assessing those subclinical, the things that are happening with the way the neurons are trying to communicate in this inflammation cascade and what's happening with the brainstem stuff that gets whipped around in these head injuries and things like that.